Thank you for joining us. This is the AutoGuide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. I'm Mike.
And I'm Kyle.
This week we have a big week. There are tons of first drives, including the new updated 2025 Ram. And not only did Kyle drive it, but we will speak to the senior brand manager. And then later on in the show, we'll cover some of the news. And for the questions, we talk about the most overrated and underrated features on a car. But first, let's have a word from our sponsor. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Welcome back. So we'll start with our first review story of the week. Just a heads up, there's a lot of Ram content this week, but it's pretty insightful. So Kyle, you got to drive the Ram somewhere that looks warm and sunny. Where were you?
We were in Austin, well, just outside of Austin in Texas, but yeah, and it was very cold just before we arrived, and then every single day we were there, it just kept getting warmer. So it was actually, yeah, perfect weather on the day that we drove.
Did you do any off-roading? Because I went to Austin and we went just about an hour outside of the city and we hit this off-road park that was fun.
We did do some off-roading in the Rebel. So that's mid-level in all of the trims. And yeah, we did some slow stuff, some water fording, some downhill with the assist that makes it super easy to do. And you can move up in 0.6 mile per hour increments or 1 kilometer an hour increments, anywhere from 1 to 5.
Oh, cool.
And so that was handy. And then we also did some quicker stuff in the Rebel, and yeah, we're going 40-ish miles per hour on trails, and it was remarkably comfortable and obviously fun.
Yeah, the Ram's always been quite comfortable for a pickup, but I mean, we haven't really touched on the biggest news is the death of the Hemi, replaced by the Turbo Hurricane engine. I've driven it before. I know how good it is. So in the Ram, there's 2 levels, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's a standard output, which is 420 horsepower, and then I want to say 469 pound-feet of torque. I don't have the stats directly out in front of me, but either way, both of those numbers are pretty sizable improvements over the old Hemi. And then there is a high output available in some of the higher trims, and that bumps it up to 540 horsepower and 521 pound-feet of torque.
Which is insane from a 3-liter. Like, if you put that engine in some sort of sports car, people would be like, "Oh my god,
yeah,
look, that's crazy power!" And this isn't a truck. Imagine if they tuned it for performance. Get well over 600. But anyway, so I have driven a Hemi pretty recently, and I'm looking forward to trying this. Does it feel like an improvement in power?
It does feel like an improvement in power in the sense that I mean, it's a modern turbo engine, right? So you get power early on and it stays for a while. It's so smooth because it's an inline 6, so you just have an inherent balance to it. You do miss the V8 rumble. I understand that that's kind of an appeal of a Hemi. I get it, but it does make for a much more smoother and more refined drive. I mean, from the inside and out. And that kind of feeds into the other big news, which is the new top trim, the tungsten. It is standard with the high output, and this thing, I mean, it's pricey. I don't want to pretend otherwise. This thing is about 90 grand US, and it's well over the 6-figure mark in Canada, but it is easily the most luxurious truck I have ever sat in or drove.
Well, the Limited I drove last summer with the e-torque Hemi, it was 6 digits in Canada too. I assume the high output takes premium because that was the case with the Grand Wagoneer.
Both outputs take premium.
Oh, really? Even the regular one?
Yes. Which makes sense because I thought about that and I was a little surprised about it. But in terms of the output, I mean, you are looking at more than the EcoBoost in most F-150s. You're looking at knocking on the door of where the Sequoia, no, not the Sequoia, the Tundra engine is. The Chevy V8 also takes premium, so it's not that surprising. But yeah, it's something to keep in mind for people who were going to be buying and replacing their Hemi. You are going to have to put premium in it.
Yeah, I obviously, like we just talked about, once it's available for us to get here locally, the Turbo 6 has to go in a comparison against another Turbo 6. Probably the Tundra, of course, the F-150. Yeah, so we'll line that up down the road. Our next story we didn't do. Dan Heyman, one of our freelancers, got to go drive the new Prologue. Reading his review, it sounds like it's exactly what Honda should have done with it. It's one of those, it's an SUV that happens to be electric as opposed to an electric car that's an SUV. It's obviously on a platform shared with the Equinox EV. What I like is the front-wheel drive and the all-wheel drive are both, I think it's like 212 and 288 horsepower. Like neither of them are crazy. They're what you need in a vehicle that size without going overboard. And the advantage is the range is nice. It doesn't look way out there like, say, an Aria or even the Ioniq 5 can to a degree. Like it just blends in. So yeah, I think it's going to be sort of the regular person's EV that apparently drives pretty well too.
Yeah, I mean that's good to hear, and Honda badly needed to get into this segment, so it's good that they're doing it. I mean, we can't pretend that we haven't heard all the issues around that platform on the GM side, so here's hoping that that doesn't cause Honda any headaches. But yeah, I think it looks good. Like you said, it's what Honda needed to do, and I very much look forward to past this when they start building their own fully independent EVs.
Yeah, I mean, having not driven it, but just from hearsay from other reviewers and whatnot, it seems like this is sort of what Toyota was trying to do with the BZ4X, but I think Honda's probably pulled it off better. Whereas something like the Aria is a slightly different class. I wouldn't say a class bigger because it's not that big, but it's going more after faster, more premium things like I think the Mach-E, whereas this is, you know, and it'll battle the Ioniq and the EV6 sort of lower power trims. But yeah, I think it's just very Honda, especially if it's somewhat responsive to drive. And then move on to another first drive that Kyle did. This one, you traveled a little further away, I think.
Little bit, yeah. We went to Portugal for this, and this is the first of three first drives that you're going to see from us over the same amount of weeks. So the John Cooper Works Countryman kicks it off. This is the new Countryman because pretty much the entire Mini lineup is changing for 2025. The classic model, the two-door, the Countryman, they did confirm that a convertible is coming. It's going to be a little later, probably next year, but we will be seeing that as well. So yay, that stays. But yeah, first in line is the JCW, and technically, I guess not a whole lot has changed in terms of the basic ingredients. You've still got a turbo 4-cylinder. It's all-wheel drive. You're getting 312 horsepower, so we actually get slightly more than Europe because Europe is capped at 300. And it's a 7-speed dual clutch, but it's a bigger package. And I know that everyone loves to complain every single time any news comes out about a Countryman. It's not very mini anymore. Yeah, that's fine. I felt okay with it. I think the good thing now is that it's a pretty decent size for families. You don't feel cramped, which could be the case in the old Countryman in the back seat. I think you drove that fairly recently.
Yeah. Yeah, like you said, Mini's become a lifestyle brand, or even just a brand, not a description of their cars. Yeah, they're a little smaller, but with the last Countryman I drove, the two things were, it was small, like it was supposed to be, but it was bigger than real small. So it was kind of straddling that in between. So this is going to probably be, you know, more of that small, compact SUV size, where like the GLB and the X2 and things like that, the Q3, where those vehicles play.
Yeah.
And my other biggest complaint, which has nothing to do with the model you drove, was it was underpowered for its size. And the the mid-turbo engine is now like in the mid 200s, which is where I think that vehicle needed to be, as opposed to it was under 200 before. So yeah.
Yeah, I saw that bump is happening where the S is now 241 horsepower, and that sounds like an excellent amount. I mean, I should to wrap up with the JCW. I think it's a very fun car. It's a blast to drive, and it really does feel like a hot hatch because it's still not that big, but it is pricey. It still rides a little harsh. But yeah, if you don't need the full hot hatch treatment, I imagine the S is going to be really good for that. So I'm hoping to drive that later on this year.
Yeah, the Countryman's a big favorite here with the family here. I wasn't sold on the styling at first, but the more I see it, I like it. But I don't know if I'll ever forgive Mini for canceling the Clubman. That was my favorite, and it's gone.
I know, and we saw a bunch of them during the drive, completely accidentally, right? But yeah, it was a little frustrating. I have a lot of thoughts about the interior, but I'm going to save those for actually another episode where I talk about the all-electric one.
All right, sounds good. So sort of wrapping up our drives this week, I spent a week in the Land Rover Defender 110 P500 SE, which is a long name, but last year I was in the 130, which is the super stretched one, P400, which alludes to the inlines like that, turbo mild hybrid. That I like that. The third row seat was huge in that for basically being grafted on. You'd think it would be, absolutely tiny. It was one of the better 3 rows I've ever sat in a SUV. I was really surprised, and it still drove nice. The engine was smooth. The mild hybrid worked really well, which isn't the case in a lot of those systems. It on the highway, it just kind of hummed along. In the city, there's always a little bit of power on tap. There was no delays. Anyway, so I took this thinking, maybe the 2-seat with the V8 is sort of more of a step up premium wise. It didn't feel that way inside. Not to say it's not premium, it's just the other one's already so nice. But what I really liked about this is it's got so much cargo space, even though it doesn't have the stretched back. Because it's on the same wheelbase, it has very little overhangs front and rear, and you can lift it over 11 inches in the air. So it's got a lot of off-road capability. And the V8 makes a nice sound. It's just a subtle sound. I wish there was a loud button like the SVR Jag gets or some of the BMWs get. But if you get on it, you still hear it. What's confusing though is this is the SE that has the V8, but this isn't the Defender V8. They are two different models and with two different outputs. So the Defender 110 P500 SE has 493 horsepower, but if you get the Defender 110 P525 V8, you get a little bit more, like 518 or something. And then the V8 also has 22-inch tires, 22-inch wheels, performance tires. So it's more meant to be one of those performance SUVs that's going to really stay on road. So this is the one I like because it's a little cheaper too. It has just 20-inch wheels with more sidewall. It's more of the all around. So driving this, unless you just want the sort of, I don't know, the flash of the V8, I guess that's why you'd get it. But this is the one to get if you're getting a 110. If you're getting a 130, go for the 6 because that's probably meant more for family duties. But this, it still drives a little harsh. It is an off-road bias vehicle, but it's a great alternative, I think, to the usual, albeit smoother, luxury players like the Mercedes GLE, BMW X5. I like its style because it's unique. I'd walk up to it or get into driving and just feel I don't know. I can't explain it, but it just gives you this feeling that feels like it's a little unique and different. I would definitely take a look at this over those if I had that kind of money.
I think it definitely is calling for a comparison with the new Lexus GX once we have access to that, because they're both, like you said, just a little bit left field of the traditional luxury players in this segment.
Yeah. V8 versus hybrid.
Yeah.
All right, so let's move on to the news. It seems like every podcast we talk about it, but more on the Mazda CX-70. So we got pricing, which, surprise, surprise, is basically the same as the CX-90. There's no real news. I mean, it was I think it was basically Mazda's first real confirmation on the engines that it will be in it, the 2 power levels, which we already had heard about, and that the hybrid's coming down the road, the plug-in. But yeah, I mean, if you do side by side comparison of pricing and trims, it's very similar. So it's kind of making me feel more and more like this might just be a two-row CX90. But again, I need to drive it, see if there's anything different. But yeah, it's we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much all we can say is we'll see. It seems like a reasonable price against like a Lexus or Infinity for what it's worth.
Yeah, and if they sort of ironed out those hesitations with the transmission engine tuning that was nothing wrong with either, it's just the way they interacted, then yeah, I think you're up to playing there. I still think it should have been the CX80 though, being sort of like a two-seat version of the 3, and then you'd leave something open to make a 70 between the 50 and 90. But anyway, time will tell.
Yes.
Next story, Volvo also gave us some news. They're changing the name. Basically, they're changing the name of a couple cars because they want to have uniform naming for their gas and for their electric vehicles. So the XC40 has changed its name and is now going to be the EX40 to match the EX90 and the EX30. And the C40 is the EC40, which is new, but I think that would give you the idea that an all-electric S60 or S90 down the road will be the EC60 or the EC90. And I mean, EC electric car, EX electric crossover, like it makes sense.
It does, but whoever is at Volvo, whoever keeps doing this, because I feel like 2 years ago they changed a lot of their trims and badge names too. They went from B's to T's or vice versa, or somewhere along the so whoever is doing this at Volvo, please just give us a break for a year. Stop renaming everything. Yeah, I understand the uniform. It makes sense. I get it, but then just take a break. That's all I ask.
Yeah, and I feel bad for some of the dealership personnel when you have an XC40 gas sitting beside an EC40 electric, but it looks basically the same. But I figure like the next gen will separate them more. But
maybe Mazda and Volvo can just have a little talk about what that's like to have two differently badged but very similar vehicles on the showroom floor.
Yeah, and in fairness to Volvo, when Infinity did this, that was almost a decade ago. It was like, geez, but now we're used to it. We got it. So
it's true. Yeah.
Then there was this study that came out, which isn't overly surprising, but if you don't want to get hit driving, get a bright car that people can see. So an actual study this was actually an Australian study, but years and years and years ago, there was a similar one in North America. They looked at all the collisions that had taken place over a multi-year period, and cars that were black, dark gray, a dark color like a ruby red or something, they were more likely to get in collisions than whites and bright yellows and silvers. So I remember someone told me when I was probably just starting to drive, if you don't want the police to see you if you're speeding, get a dark car, but then motorists also won't see you. So if you don't speed and you want to be seen, get a bright car. If you're doing things that might get you in trouble and you don't care if you get hit, I guess get a dark car.
I haven't looked into the details of this study, but what I'm curious about, is it more likely because per capita, because there's very few bright color cars on the road, or is it literally just, well, yeah, like dark color cars get in more accidents because they're everywhere?
No, it was by percentage. So
okay.
It was something, I can't remember the numbers. Go to AutoGuide and read the article. But it was like, let's say that 20% of cars were white cars. They only got in like 13% of the accidents. Something
gotcha.
Like that.
Okay.
Yeah, and like what I find interesting is the three colors they say get them the least is yellow, silver, and white. And yellow and white I get because they're both bright. Silver, I guess. But like, what about a bright red? And they specifically say avoid dark colors like pink. And pink's not a dark color in my books, but
I mean, it was on that one Boxster we had a little while ago. It was a darker pink.
But yeah, I mean, I get it in nighttime conditions, fog. Yeah, it's, if they don't have lights on, you won't see them. Whereas a brighter color might stick out, especially if it's parked on the road. I've come upon parked cars. I'm like, oh, geez, there's a car there because it was so dark. And
it's true. Yeah.
Another story that's, again, no surprise. The smaller, lower powered Land Cruiser is a lot cheaper than the last giant V8 one. It's not smaller. What I mean is it's not built on a giant truck chassis, the big V8 like it used to be. It's still truck based, but with the hybrid and whatnot, it's got quite the price reduction.
Yes, I mean that's not surprising, like you said, considering where it's now sitting. I'm it sort of starts where the Forerunner more or less ends, so it gives that continuation for people buying an off-roader in a Toyota dealership, and and it stays underneath the related Lexus GX. So yeah, makes a ton of sense. They should sell a bunch of them, provided dealers don't mark it up.
Which they will for the first year or two, but after that,
Yes.
we'll see how it goes. The like the old Land Cruiser, part of the problem too was you got it loaded. Like there wasn't really a down market version. It's not like this has a stripped out version, but there's just a full range here.
Mhm.
So that's part of it too. Well, that wraps it up for news. We are going to hear from our sponsor once again. And when we come back, we will be talking all things Ram with Ram USA. So stick around and we'll talk to you soon. eBay Motors is here for the ride. Do you remember your first car? I sure do. I was fresh out of university and I wanted nothing more than a car. So I went to some dealers with two things in mind. I wanted a two-door coupe and I wanted a manual transmission. After looking around, I finally ended up with a 2003 Oldsmobile Alero coupe with a 5-speed manual and a 4-cylinder engine. A lot of people didn't understand why I bought that car, but I loved it. I would take it everywhere. I also wanted to modify it. I put a lot of parts on that didn't work. I put on some wheels and they ended up ripping apart my rear brakes and I had to get rid of them. My intake, my exhaust, my suspension, and some interior bits were all custom made. It would have helped so much if there was some sort of way that I could get guaranteed parts for my car back then. Another thing I loved to do with the car was I would take it drag racing. I would do low 15 seconds and thought I was so fast, which I wasn't. But you know what? I was having a blast and I was getting to run the car harder than I was allowed to on the street. I also went to a lot of charity car shows, road trips, and weeks up at the cottage. I had the car for almost 2 years until one day it was written off in a snowstorm in Detroit by a mail truck. It was a sad day, and I really miss that car. One day, maybe I'll get another Alero, but for now, I'll just have good memories of this car and how much fun I had with it. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, roof rack, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We have a special guest from Ram today. Brant, why don't you introduce yourself and what you do for the company?
Yeah, hey, I'm Brant Combs, brand manager for Ram light duty pickups, which will include the new 2025 Ram 1500 and a handful of other products and exciting news that we have coming later this year. So we have a lot going on over here, and excited about talking about all of it today.
Just you mentioning for light pickups just kind of triggered my mind that I don't think everyone realizes how massive the pickup world is, because like there's so much for light duty and then you got the heavy duty and then you got the commercial grade. It's crazy. There's just so much out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go ahead.
No, it's just as far as things we have coming this year, right? I mean, we just with light duty alone, we've got the new 25 truck, but then we have more news about sport truck lineup, which is part of that, which is the Rebel, and then some new product coming, and then we've got our Stella Frame platform coming in Q4, which is EV, our first introduction into electric vehicle trucks. We've got a lot of light duty news, and even inside of light duty, which is inside of Ram with all the other nameplates you mentioned, there's certainly a lot going on.
Yeah. So as we mentioned earlier in the podcast, Kyle was actually at the First Drive event. You two were hanging out earlier this week, so I'll let him start with the questions because he has firsthand knowledge of the truck right now.
It's true. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Brant, for joining us. One thing that a lot of the journalists and colleagues at the event were asking about, or talking about, I guess, amongst ourselves is, the Hurricane, the new 3-liter inline 6 turbo engine, in the high output form, it has a higher specific output than like a BMW M3. So during that, you showed a quick durability test video at the launch event. And so could you maybe go into a little more detail for listeners and viewers about what exactly Ram does for that sort of testing for a new engine?
Yeah, absolutely. That video that you were describing is pretty cool, right? It shows that engine going through the paces, right? High rev, all different, articulations and angles and ups. It's very cool, and that's just a small piece of what we go through. I think one thing that's interesting to talk about when you're talking about what we put the engines through is that that's a vehicle specific test, not a powertrain specific test. So everything that our Pentastar V6 or our 5.7 Hemi or our 6.2, all of the truck tests, right? This new powertrain has to meet those, right? So this isn't a new unique, structure for a smaller displacement turbo engine. This engine has to do what truck customers expect this engine to do, right? So it's going through all the paces, if not more, than the legendary Hemis did, right? And then the 3.6 Pentastar, that's been a great engine for us for a while. So I think that's an important thing to think about. It goes through all the same things. It's 150,000 mile, base test. It goes through deserts. It goes through, those brutally icy spots in Minnesota. It does the towing passes, right? It goes through all the same things that the trucks were expected to do previously.
Yeah, I spent the summer, well, not the whole summer, but I took a 3,000-mile road trip in a Ram Limited with the Hemi e-Torque, and I was impressed with the whole package. So I'm looking forward to trying the new engine. I've driven a slightly less powerful one in the Grand Wagoneer, and that's a very heavy vehicle, and it did really well. Like, I was really impressed. In my article, as Kyle said, I think I mentioned, it makes more power than the M3 CSL or whatever they call that, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's a lot of power from a small package, but it is a it's a straight six twin turbo engine, right? I mean, it's not a small engine, right? Even though the displacement is only 3 liters. I mean, this thing can do some serious work. It's towing 11,500 pounds, 540 horsepower. It can perform. And it's a significant jump over the 5.7 Hemi, right? Even in the standard output form, over 25 horsepower increase, and that's what's going to be in a lot of our lineup, right? That's what's optional on Tradesman and Bighorn. That's what's coming standard with Laramie and Rebel. And we're gonna continue to see a little bit more Rebel this year, and those standard output will be in that truck. I know Kyle got to experience that as well. That engine performs well, not just from towing and the cold and the snow and the sand that we talked about from a testing standpoint, but really the off-road paces that we took it through. It's incredibly comfortable and responds extremely well to anything that you want to do with that sport type truck as well.
So kind of leading into what you're talking about there with the new turbo sort of replacing the V8s, what do you see as sort of the next big challenges over the next decade, like in the pickup market? Like, what do you think Ram has to do in the next decade, or all the competitors will have to do?
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of changes in the light duty pickup segment over the next 10 years. A lot. Inside of that next 10 years is 2030, right? And that's what we've set out as our target, to be 50% EV. And so we talked a little bit about this week. That's a significant change in the market, but it's also still 50% ICE vehicles. So we were really excited to talk about what we've changed in that 50% for this Hurricane engine and how it helps us meet those goals. But then with the EV coming on the other end, we've talked about, we announced it last April in New York, the REV. We're entering the EV segment from a best in class position. The truck will have, we talked to truck customers about what they need in a truck, and we really feel like we put that package together. So that's coming in Q4. But to answer your question about the change in the segment over that period of time, those are kind of the two bookends, ICE and pure EV. But we've got another truck coming in the middle with the Ram Charger that I think really helps kind of solve that transition question that you're asking. And I think it answers a lot of questions for a lot of people about, the transition from trucks and ICE into EV. With something that has all the benefit of an EV truck when it comes to instantaneous torque and power and capability, but eliminates a lot of that range anxiety. And you can be on, potentially have your whole week go by with full electric, and charging that truck at night, and then not have to change the way you operate when you hit the road for a long trip, like what you referenced earlier. Hitting the road for a long trip, you can do that the way that you do it now. And so I think that truck will be a big piece of that transition over the next few years.
Well,
Yeah,
I thank you for answering. Sorry, go ahead, Kyle. I was going to say, I thank you for answering Kyle's next question that he had already. So.
Well, yeah, sort of. And I mean, that's the fascinating thing about Ramcharger, right? Is and we talked about it very briefly at the event this week. No one else is really doing this approach, and so you've already covered, Brant, fairly well there about why Ram sees the need for the Ramcharger kind of in the middle, but. Yeah, why do you think that is that you're sort of alone in taking this approach so far in this segment?
Well, we're moving to EV, right? So Ram Rev is coming, and Ram Rev, the fully electric offering, is a like I said, a best in class positioning. So we're very, very excited about that truck. But we ask truck customers, I think this answers the question for both Rev and Ramcharger, because we asked truck customers what they needed to be in consideration for that next, wave of light duty pickups. And the answers were capability, right? Towing, range, and charge time. And so we feel like we put together, a package with Rev that answered all of those. And then to take it a step further for the number one detractor, which is range and range anxiety, we answered that question even further with the Ramcharger. And so I think that's where that progression comes from, and that's where we saw that need, and believe we're going to put a package together that current truck customers will really appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thanks.
I can't believe more people aren't taking that approach in general, not just with trucks. I mean, some competitors have done the whole gas engine as a range extender, and I think, as you said, for the transition, it makes sense. And with the pickup, the thing we always hear about the other electric pickups that are out there is, when you tow, you lose your range, things like that. Like, it can tow no problem, but the range goes down. So, as you said, you could drive electric all week long, and then if you have a weekend tow, you have that gas engine to extend your range. It's just, I think that's the one that's going to really change things as we get to full EV. And then transitioning to the Rev, we saw obviously at the auto shows and what's coming. The thing that really stood out to me is the size of that battery, which is massive and should hopefully deliver better range and take care of some of the range anxiety. Was that, you've kind of already alluded to it, but was that a big factor for customers?
Yeah. Well, the factors are the ones that I just shared, right? It's range, capability, and charge time. And so we believe we put together, a package in the way that they're configured with the 350 mile and the 500 mile setups to answer those three needs in the most, efficient packaging, right? That's what we were after. And so 350 miles, that's a big number, right? That's a fuel, a normal, standard fuel tank, vehicle now, right? That or light duty pickup now. That 500 mile range is, a large fuel tank and something that people would, can configure now in an ICE vehicle. So those are big, right? Because that's part of the transition. Can this truck do what my truck did previously? Charge time's a big one, right? When you get into larger batteries that answer that call. So, being able to charge at 800 volts, being able to do, 10 minutes, about 110 miles, that's a big deal, right? For guys transitioning to the way that they're charging or filling up, right, to pick up, right? They need that to happen quickly. They can't plan hours of the day. When that truck's not running, in a lot of cases, they're not making money, or they're not accomplishing what they're trying to do, or they're not, getting their family to the place they're trying to go. And so all of that, still being able to tow 14,000 pounds is a lot, right? That's we like to say no compromise. I mean, I think that truly is the target, right? To bring in all of the factors that a truck customer needs and not make them feel like they're having to sacrifice something to do it.
That's great. So Kyle, I want to ask your tradesman question now.
Yeah, well, I mean, talking about like no compromise and giving them all the tools on the event. The Tungsten, I have to say, is incredible, and as a luxury truck, it really does kind of set the bar now in terms of genuine luxury vehicles that just happen to be pickups. But I was very impressed with the Tradesman and the content improvement there, and just with the standard output Hurricane, it's plenty quick. It's a really nice overall package that kind of moves away from the idea of like a work truck.
Mhm.
And so I was wondering, from your perspective, Brant, do you see the demand for something like tungsten, but are you seeing a change in people maybe wanting more of like a back to basics truck, and does Tradesman kind of address that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that the Tradesman will be a bigger piece for us in the coming year, particularly for what you mentioned, right? People are cost conscious, but also the features and safety and security and infotainment and everything, that if it's making it down into that trim, right, we're meeting their needs. And one thing that I always have really tried to consider with that Tradesman trim is not so much a price walk or an entry level trim and then you add content as you go up. There are pieces of content that are commercial customers, that are work customers, that people that truly use a Tradesman trim truck, that they need, right? So just because it's content or has cost doesn't mean that doesn't belong in a Tradesman pickup, right? And so we tried really hard to figure out to make that balance, right? To what is that they want. They need a bigger screen. They need to be able to see that backup screen in detail. They have to have Bluetooth, right? Everybody's got to be able to have easily, detecting their phones using while they're working, while they're running around town, while they're using nav on their phone, whether they're using our nav system, right? They've got to be able to have trailer reverse steering control. That seems like a luxury, right? To have that knob that's back. But when you get into work applications, that's who's using that. And so those things are really important to us to make sure that adaptive cruise control, a little bit larger screen, the safety and security, the pedestrian detection, that those blind spot monitoring, those are things that are important to companies as well, right? Like safety, getting the people using that truck home at night safely, super important, even for an entry level truck. And so I think you see the things that are important move down into that Tradesman trim and become standard across the lineup, but while maintaining that competitive price. And I think how we talked about that a little bit, right? The price of the Tradesman didn't go up, right? So we added a lot of that content. So the value proposition definitely improved from 24 to 25 on the Tradesman pickup.
Yeah, it's a really appealing package, and I hope Mike gets a chance to drive it just like I did.
Yeah. So just two quick things before we wrap up. One, I was looking at this yesterday, getting ready for this call. I'm old enough to have been in my 20s when the original Ram SRT10 came out. And this new truck in the high output makes more power than that, which is crazy. Because I remember driving that thing the first time and being blown away at the power. So yeah, that's just some relation on how much power there is.
For sure. And I think with the combination of the luxury, the trims that it's coming in, it's an all-inclusive package. I encourage everyone to spend some time getting that 24-way seat configured to their, to their needs, turning getting their streaming service connected so that they can really get into that Klipsch audio system that's 1,228 watts and 23 speakers with a 12-inch sub and has those cool Klipsch horns up in the A-pillars. And have all of those senses going right and feeling very comfortable, but then also really leaning into 540 horsepower at the same time and really getting to enjoy it. It's definitely an experience, particularly for light duty pickup.
Yeah. All right. So this is a completely different topic, but are you driving anything cool, or do you have anything cool stored away for the summer?
I'm driving the 25 tungsten. I mean, there's no
Nice.
There's no better truck to drive, right? Getting some miles on that one, getting to kind of experience all that it offers. So I'm really enjoying that one. I think that one's going to be really hard to turn in. I'm trying to appreciate it now while I've got it, because from a complete package, it doesn't get much better than that, particularly for my family. I've got a son that plays hockey. We're traveling all over the area, and it's perfect for the whole family to pile in, be incredibly comfortable, keep that gross bag in the back there along with everybody else's.
Keep the hockey bag out of the passenger spot. Yeah,
we really appreciate it. It's the perfect setup for us.
All right. Well, yeah, I look forward to seeing it in real life and hearing more about it from Kyle next time I see him. I mean, he's already told me a lot earlier. So we thank you a lot for coming on, and we hope to have you back on when you have some more light truck news down the road this year or next year.
All right. That sounds great. I look forward to it.
All right. Thanks.
Brant.
See you.
All right. Well, that was a great talk with Brant. We learned a lot. He obviously is really passionate about the vehicles he sells and, well, doesn't sell, but helps create, which is good because you need that. I mean, he's not just there as a job. He seems to really care. So we're going on to listener questions. We didn't have any this week, and the comments still were going on about the CX-70. Seems to be quite the hot topic. So I thought of a question we can ask, and I selected this photo by random, but apparently it's saying Kyle's overrated, and can't really disagree.
No,
It's fair. So anyway, what we wanted to talk about overrated and underrated are features on vehicles. So what is it in modern cars that is underrated and you not necessarily can't live without, but when you get in a vehicle that doesn't have it, you really notice it's missing? And what features in every new car you drive you can't stand and you feel are overrated? So have you thought of any, or should I start?
Well, since this is your kind of your idea, I feel like you should lead, especially because I don't want to pick something random and then if I happen to pick yours, then you're left on the spot. So yeah, I think you should go first.
All right, I'll tell you my overrated and underrated.
Okay.
And then after yours, I'll tell you one that I know is going to be controversial because you and I have very differing opinions on it. So underrated is the heated steering wheel in the winter. It's like a needed feature. I'm so used to it now because I just much prefer to drive without gloves on. But when it's below freezing by a good chunk, you can at first until the vehicle warms up. And then when it does, you take your gloves off and the wheel's frozen, especially if it has any like metal or wood inserts. And along with that sort of frill, it's 360 cameras. I can't believe how much I like them, and I get in a car that doesn't have one, and when I'm like backing into a parking spot, it's like, oh, I can't see the lines on my screen. I mean, don't necessarily need them, but I'm just so used to them being there. And then I get in my car that doesn't have a backup camera. It's quite a change. So what's your underrated?
Oh, my underrated. Okay, so we are just doing one at a time, and then okay.
Yeah.
All right. My underrated is sort of related, but not ventilated seats. But more specifically, ventilated seats should be in more performance vehicles. As someone who's done a fair amount of track days at different events, getting into bucket seats on a warm day on a track, just ventilated seats would be really nice. I think that would be very well appreciated by anyone who buys them.
Yeah, especially the ones that have the fake Alcantara or suede. I get it. It grips you and you don't move, and it does, but it also gets you very sweaty.
Yeah, it keeps everything.
Yeah. All right, so overrated. I know it's a safety feature, and some people really like it, and some people need it, even if they won't admit it. But lane keep systems drive me nuts. I almost disable it as soon as I get a car, and they're getting worse for some reason. Like they used to give you a light nudge or make the warning. Now, if they pick up some random like tar line in the road or a skid mark, and they think it's the road line, they will yank the car that way. And sometimes like trying to yank you right off the road, and I have to physically wrestle with the wheel. These are growing pains as we try to get, I guess, autonomous. But yeah, most of them are way too aggressive, and they're not picking up the right lines. Usually it's just an immediate off when I get in a car.
Mm-hmm.
So what's your overrated feature?
I have two, if you'll let me. All right. So one, native navigation.
Yeah.
I don't really see the need nowadays. I mean, unless you're gonna be like a certain OEM and just start removing CarPlay and Android Auto. We all have systems in our pocket that can handle navigation, and we're more used to it because we use that all the time when we're not in a car. So I don't really understand the need of native navigation. I will say I understand that there can be a benefit with EVs right now. If it's better integrated with the system, it can understand your current charge rate, your charging history, or your usage consumption history. And so it could maybe map you more accurately to where you need to charge. I get that, but largely native nav, I don't see the point. But my other one, related to the RAM, because we haven't talked about that in a few minutes. Normally I would say digital rear view mirrors are overrated because it seems strange to me, and I personally have a hard time focusing on them. I understand if you have stuff in the way, and so that's the only way to see out the back. But normally when I see people driving with an empty vehicle and it on, I don't understand, because it takes longer for your eyesight to adjust. The Ram 1500 though does have a cool new feature that they talked about at the event, where if you integrate it with a trailer, you can still see the back beyond the trailer with an additional camera, in a way that it won't take up the central screen, the central touch screen, because that's normally where camera views are, right? But because of a digital rear view, you see the back behind the trailer, and then you still have your entire touch screen to do your normal stuff with. And I thought that was a pretty clever usage of this otherwise overrated feature.
Yeah, I agree with the digital rear view cameras. And it's funny, when I did that long road trip with the Ram, that's the only time I kept it on. And it's because I think they've done a good job like integrating theirs, and it just helps not having to look over the bed. But yeah, normally I don't even turn them on. And to your other point about the native nav, don't get me started on a rant about taking CarPlay out of cars. Like, people are literally not going to buy a car over that one thing, as inconsequential as it may seem. Like, yeah, because then you have to have your phone glued to the screen, and you're not going to force or convince people to use another system just because, whatever reason it's been put in. But anyway, I think that's one of those things, like Honda removing their volume knob, that will be quickly 180'd in a couple of years when everyone just complains and the sales start going down, or customers are outraged. So, because all the customers are probably going to buy it not knowing that, and then they'll go to plug in their phone and be like, wait, what?
Yeah.
So anyway, so my final overrated, I know we're going on in this segment, but I cannot stand and think there's no use for one pedal driving on EVs. And a study has come out proving that one pedal is actually less efficient than any other driving mode, basically. So it's jerky. I don't like it. I get it on a track. It can kind of be cool, but yeah, I know you love it, but I can't stand it.
It's whenever we swap vehicles, when we have EVs, that's always the thing, right? It's like, I've turned on the most aggressive regen possible, and you've turned on the whatever way to have it feel most like a ICE vehicle.
I can't remember which manufacturer, Mercedes maybe, has come out and basically said not like absolutely zero regen on is the most efficient way for the EV, just letting it free glide, assuming you're driving well. But yeah, anytime you're trying to get a little regen, you're losing more than you're gaining speed to power wise. I don't know the specifics, but there's been a couple studies now. I'm sure there's some manufacturers out there that have an in-between that nails it. But yeah, I absolutely hate following someone that's using it, because every time they let go of the gas, their brake lights come on. You think they're stopping because something's going on. It's usually Teslas, because everyone drives that way on the Tesla. Yeah. And then you start braking all the time until you realize, and then now you realize what's happening. So when the brake lights come on, you start ignoring it, thinking it's one pedal, until there isn't a panic stop. So yeah, it's just poorly conceived idea.
That is something I'm very mindful of when I'm driving on the highway with one pedal. Is I'm like, shoot, I can't lift off because it will look like I'm braking. So I will sometimes turn it off on the highway.
Yeah, around town I get it, especially stop and go traffic. It's great, but a lot of cars have sort of some sort of stop and go system with their adaptive cruise that can do that.
It's true.
All right, so this is going on. So we'll just quickly cover what's next. So this week you were driving the Ram, but you just got back and you have that V6 Camry we talked about last week. So last of a breed.
Yes, and to really drive home the point of this vehicle, I was out doing groceries with my wife last night, and as I was loading stuff into the car, a dad walked by and was like, "Is this custom or is this from the factory, this TRD kit?" I was like, "Oh, it's a factory option." He's like, "Oh, I really like this. It looks cool." So yeah, I'm enjoying driving it so far throughout the week.
Yeah, I think cool dad's sort of what they're going after with that car, or cool mom, someone that's needs the practicality basically of a family car, but doesn't want to look like they're just in another crossover. Speaking of crossover, so the CX-30 I picked up, I swore I booked the turbo, but I got the non-turbo, which I'm actually really excited about, because I don't know if I've ever driven a 30 without the turbo. And it's still the loaded model, but it's going to be one of the players in an upcoming super comparison that we'll inform you guys about more as we get closer. I'm sure this is probably the exact vehicle. There's a lot of features in it that for the class is a surprise. I mean, go higher up, you find them, but not sort of in the more mainstream. And I looked at the pricing, and it's pretty much on par with like the loaded up Crosstreks and Teos and Seltos. But yeah, like it has front parking sensors, power lift gate, the washer wipers, the washing fluids built into the wipers, the wet wiper style thing. I mean, then it's got little like frill things, like who cares, but like light up side sill plates, and it just feels more like you're in a little premium near luxury vehicle. So it'll be interesting because the non-turbo engine, it's fine for the class. Like it feels like all the other vehicles upgrades. So the only time you really feel it is on the highway, like any cars, weight and wind are against you. But in town, it's pretty responsive. So more on that down the road with my full review. And then next week we have a comparison of crossovers. Two more that might be in that same comparison.
Yeah, we're getting started on them early before we see all of them together in the spring.
Yeah, so Corolla Cross Hybrid versus Seltos, I think it's the X line. So that'll be interesting because it's two sort of different takes to get to the same point. So it should be interesting.
It's also a rematch of sorts because back when the Corolla Cross launched, we put that up against the Seltos, but that was the pre-facelift, and that was the non-hybrid Corolla Cross. And so the Seltos won there. So I'm very curious to see if that happens again with these ones.
Well, yeah, like our biggest complaint was sort of the general around the drivetrain. There's some other complaints too, but that was one of the big ones. So even if it still acts the same, but gets way better economy, I mean, we've driven enough hybrid Toyota products. We know what we're kind of going to be in for, so it should impress. And no one's going on trips next week. That's pretty nice. Get a full week at home to work.
Yeah, it's been 6 weeks, so yeah, it's good.
All right, well, thanks for tuning in to the AutoGuide Show brought to you by eBay Motors. That's all for this week, and we hopefully will see you next week.
Have a good one.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Your elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a driveway entirely its own. Brake kits, LED headlights, whatever you need, eBay Motors has it. And with the eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply.